All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Pondering Christianity. Today, we're going to go through this video of 9 reasons we can rely on near-death experiences as proof of the afterlife. I'll probably have a much cleaner title than that, but that's basically what we're going to go through. So today, we're going to look to educate you guys on 9 ways that you can know how to, in fact, trust near-death experiences as proof of the afterlife. That being said, for those of you who are new here, Pondering Christianity is a Christian apologetic YouTube channel ran by myself. And what we aim to do is we look to make the conversation a little more simplistic, okay? So my goal is to try to take complicated apologetics and bring it down to more of a mainstream level and have a conversation there, because ultimately I feel that if we stick into the super complicated matters and people don't necessarily walk away learning anything, then it's not really beneficial. So that's the goal of the channel. So if you're new here, that's what we do. And specifically, this video series is we are focusing in on the excellence of near-death experience. All right. And by that, I just mean all the awesome information out there that we can learn from it. So this is an investigation into near-death experiences. And so we want to bring everybody up to speed as to what they can learn from them, and kind of you guys, I want to kind of bring you guys along with me so that you can see the evidence for yourself and determine, if maybe if I made a deduction from that evidence that you might not necessarily agree with, and engage in that conversation, but ultimately to help kind of educate you on what I'm learning too, and have some fun along the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Okay, so today we're going to be going through, apologize, got to come back to me real quick here. Today we're going to be going through Evidence of the Afterlife by Jeffery Long and with Paul Perry. Now, about Jeffery Long, this gentleman is the founder of the Near Death Experience Research Foundation.org/site survey. He has collected and surveyed over 1,000 near-death experiences, both Western and non-Western sources, and we'll kind of discuss what that means, in addition to his medical background. He is a full-fledged MD, so he has the education, I would say, necessary to determine if someone really had a near-death experience or not based off of the medical qualifications. So I think that kind of helps add validity, obviously, to what he has to say on the topic. But nonetheless, I think the proof is in the pudding. So let's check out what he has to say on the topic. So first up, like I said, we're going to dive right in. So first up, we're going to look at proof number 1, okay? So these are going to be evaluations of near-death experiences, and then these are going to be 9 different criterias that we can apply to a near-death experience to determine if it's reliable or not, okay? In terms of what we learn from the near-death experience and if it's actually validating something worthwhile, okay? All right, so proof number 1, lucid death, okay? So real quick, I'm going to give you guys some brief paraphrases from the book as well as some direct quotes and where you can find them, okay? So overview of what a lucid death would be. Speaking both medically and logically, it is not possible to have a highly lucid experience while unconscious or clinically dead. Okay, that seems like an obvious statement, but for the sake of clarity, that's why we want to include that definition there, because we want to have a very clear understanding of what it means to have a lucid death or a lucid experience while dead, or clinically dead, or unconscious for that matter. Those things are kind of the criteria that we're applying to this first thing here, this first proof. These people are experiencing vivid via senses and consciousness, right? These are their receptors, if you will, more real than real experiences, okay? So they're not just dying and having a hallucination or kind of like this distant dream or this experience they can't really recall. This is a higher level of reality that they're experiencing through this. And so they describe it as vivid and more real than real. And so that's lucid, right? These are experiences that are what they believe beyond reality, okay? So how would you determine a dream, how you would determine a dream from reality is the same process of deciphering reality from reality, okay? And what I mean by that is you would say, well, how would they know? Well, in the same sense that you know when you're done dreaming, okay? You know that when you've awoken from that dream, you know that you're done, right? So in that same sense, you're aware from your dream to awake, right? A state of awakeness, that's the exact same level of determination these people are saying that they have when they die and move to the next life. is they have this level of awareness, the same that you would have in that experience. So it's a way to kind of understand that. All right. Now, the first objection, obviously we would come at this from a skeptical perspective of the first objection we would have is these people are clearly going through hallucinations or dreams, okay? Now, here's the thing. On page 57, he outlines the criteria that is necessary for that is obviously you need to have a brain that is intact while doing so. Okay, so page 57, following cardiac arrest, a lucid, organized, and conscious experience should be impossible. And as a matter of fact, brain activity goes flat 10 to 20 seconds after the heart stops beating as measured by an EEG. And I would totally tell you guys what that acronym means. I've tried practicing rehearsing this word, but it's insanely long. So just Google, it's really difficult. So just to Google EEG and yeah, you'll get it. But it's basically the tool that they use to measure the brain the electrical brain activity to ensure that the brain is alive and active. So after the heart stops, 10 to 20 seconds after the brain stops receiving blood, the EEG will flatline. And that is how we measure when someone's brain is essentially non-responsive, is brain dead, if you will. Okay. Sweet. Okay. So that's proof number 1. All right. Very, very interesting. All right. So moving into proof number 2. All right. An out-of-body experience. Okay. Now we're not talking like I'm drugged up and blah, 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 right? No, this is the out-of-body experience is a unique perspective in the sense that you're not just seeing your body, you're actually observing the entire area, not just your body, but the area, the people, what they're doing, what they're saying. You're experiencing this as if from a third person's perspective, and typically from the ceiling. Okay, so page 69, this defines it as the separation of consciousness from the physical body. Excuse me. So that's exactly how they would define that. Out-of-body experience is the separation of consciousness from the physical body. Now, of course, you could go along the lines of argument that consciousness is your physical body, your mind and your brain are one, okay? And so, but that doesn't explain these out-of-body experiences people are having. And as a matter of fact, on page 72, an out-of-body experience study conducted by Janice Holden, who has a PhD, and she's at the University of North Texas, found of the OBE reports, 92% were found to be accurate, meaning that they had to report what they saw, who was doing what, all these different factors, everything that they observed within the scene. Now, why is that so significant? Well, simply, the study held such a high standard that it required 100% accuracy in what events they were describing. Otherwise, they would be labeled as inaccurate. Okay, that is very significant. Okay, so if you have an out-of-body experience and you take the time to describe this experience to them in the study and you have one thing wrong, you could have 99% of it correct. If you have one element wrong in the out-of-body experience description, they will label that as inaccurate, okay? And so that's why that study is so significant, is because it's showing us that of the people who are claiming to have out-of-body experiences, they're describing what the doctors are doing, they're describing what people in the hallway are doing, they're describing where items are being put, the exact procedures that these guys are using to resuscitate their bodies, and they're unconscious the whole time. So that is of great significance in their ability to describe with such high levels of accuracy. That's why that's so impactful, I find. And now, of course, a skeptics analysis. And so what I'm going to try to do is continue to have a skeptics analysis of each of the proofs as we briefly cover these things. Because of the ones that I found, of the skeptics analysis that I found, I want to present those as, hey, let's talk about this. Let's see what the legitimacy of these analyses are. So memory fragments are producing the imagery people are seeing. Now, the thing is, the reason that theory lacks an explanatory power for this is because memory fragments are exactly that, memories, okay? You don't learn new information from a memory, okay? But these people who are having these OBEs are, in fact, gathering new information when they come back. For instance, knowing how the resuscitation process went, knowing where things were placed. One gentleman who had an OBE, he was in a coma for about a week, and when he came to, he saw where they placed his dentures when they took him out of his mouth. He was unconscious when this happened, and he saw where they had placed the dentures in a drawer, and he had asked the nurse for his dentures, and she didn't know where it was, and he told her where to go look for them. So that's just one example of how these OBEs are resulting in new information that these people are coming back with. So that's why that's of great significance. Okay, next up, proof number 3. So proof number 3 is blind sight. And what I mean by that is people who are blind, typically from birth or shortly after, who have literally no conception of what is vision, what is color. They would have little, like very minute understanding, if not none whatsoever, as they've never had vision. And so these people who have near-death experiences, who are blind, are reporting, hey, I saw some stuff. I saw some things. I don't quite know how to explain it, but I did see these. I had a new level of awareness. I was able to visually, it's a supernatural vision, certainly, but they were reporting that they had a new sense that they had not had before, which they figured was sight. Vicky, who was blind, and this is off of page 84, Vicky, who was blind shortly after birth in an incubator. So this means weeks after her birth, she experienced blindness. So there's no way she could have a preconceived notion of what sight is, and therefore, why would she have a hallucination or a dream where she could see? Blind people don't do that. Blind people have dreams and visions, but they're using the senses that they have, smell, taste, touch, hearing. Those are the things that they're using to determine what's going on. They don't see. That's not part of their hallucination. That wouldn't be a part of the brain. But however, they're reporting seeing in these near-death experiences, which would show that as the consciousness separates and they gain that awareness, they're no longer limited by their physical body's capabilities. So Vicky, who was blind shortly after birth in an incubator, experienced sight for the first time after her first NDE at age 12, but she also had a second one at age 22. She recognized her body via the ring on her finger. She recognized her ring because she knew its unique shape. She had a ring that had these very specific flowers on it, and so it would have had a very, very unique texture to it. So she was able to recognize the shape, is how she describes it. She experienced a sense of light, a range of colors with obvious difficulty explaining precisely what colors, in addition to the usual sights of a near-death experience, such as beings of light, seeing and meeting deceased relatives, all the other usual things you would expect to see, a tunnel of light, like I said, life review, etc. So she saw all of those things happen within her near-death experience. Many other accounts report having terrible vision entering their near-death experience, such as low level of visibility, perhaps they're nearsighted or they can't see very far, et cetera, all kinds of, hindrances to their vision. And here in their near-death experiences, they're reporting having supernatural vision, the ability to see things that are far away as easily as something that was up close. All right. So Skeptics Analysis, these people are simply lying or simply guessing off of prior knowledge. I don't find there's a whole lot of explanatory power there. A lot of the Skeptic Analysis, there are some much better skeptical theories on some of these proofs, but some of them are referring to someone seeing from prior knowledge. But there's no way the brain could reconstruct a vision of seeing something if it had no prior information to work with. And so it doesn't really account for people who are completely blind having a near-death experience and seeing things. It doesn't really account for that, because how would the brain reconstruct a vision using information it didn't have prior? That would be really difficult, I would assume, or impossible, rather. I would say impossible. Just for the record. Okay, so proof 4, impossibly conscious. So on page 93, how this is different. These people are under general anesthesia, which is defined as anesthesia affecting the entire body and accompanied by a loss of consciousness. This is different from local anesthesia, mind you, okay? Now, I'm not talking like they numbed up their arms. They're under general anesthesia for their surgery. Okay, so we are referring to general anesthesia and not local. Pain relief, loss of memory of the procedure, commonly known as amnesia, loss of consciousness, motionless, reduced autonomic nerve responses, meaning reduced heart rate, slower breathing, or lower than normal blood pressure. These are the symptoms you would expect to see someone under in general anesthesia. Now, this is the most common associated effects of of anesthesia. Now, that doesn't line up with what these people describe their experiences as being. And not only that, this is such a relevant discussion, such a relevant topic, because these NDEs are under extremely monitored conditions. I mean, these people are being watched by medical professionals and machinery that's monitoring heart rate, EEGs that are monitoring brain activity. I mean, there's so many elements that are in a controlled condition in these situations that it just simply doesn't add up that they would be having vivid or lucid experiences during these conditions. And not only that, we have the medical data to verify that these people are in fact showing physical numbers that would represent a person who is unconscious. Okay. Now, of course, the skeptical analysis would say too little anesthesia, therefore consciousness was able to return to some level of functionality. Now, the reason this is lacking explanatory power is for this reason right here. This ignores NDEs resulting from anesthesia overdosing. Okay, so these are people who had severe allergic reactions or too much anesthesia given to them, and they started to die, right? Whatever complications are resulting from that. So how can they be having a near-death experience? Then it's being explained by the fact that they're having a near-death experience from the amount of anesthesia they're given, right? And then you're trying to say that they had too little. It's like, no, like this is monitored. They are undergoing serious circumstances due to having too much of it, right? They're having to be resuscitated because they have too much of it. So how are you going to say that these people they had too little of it and therefore were experiencing some level of consciousness and therefore a vision or hallucination resulting in this near-death experience? And bear in mind, the numbers on this are also the description of anesthesia awareness, which is when someone has too little. That's when someone has too little anesthesia, so they call it anesthesia awareness, right? That's 3 out of 1,000 times. 3 out of 1,000 times. So it's not a very common thing. Yet the numbers of people who have near-death experiences in these situations is much higher than that. So that's where those numbers aren't adding up, okay? That's why that's of significance, okay? Proof number 5, all right? Perfect playback, all right? This is referring to the life reviews that people are going through when they have their near-death experiences, okay? And I'm moving through these pretty quickly, okay? And that's because I want to give you guys the information as quickly, as condensed as I possibly can, okay? I want to give you that. And if you really want, like I said, if you really want to dive in deep, get the book. It's an excellent, excellent book. So get the book if you really want to dive in deep on the topic. I'm just giving you guys the flyby of the 9 ways that we can validate these things, okay? According to Jeffery Long, of course. Now, perfect playback. Okay, so this is the next proof. Life reviews aren't simply just someone's life flashing before their eyes, okay, or before your eyes. It's not like, oh, my life flashed before my eyes. This is something that's commonly associated with some other experiments. There's a difference, okay? In the life review, this is a narrated experience with a being of light and love, is how it's commonly described, where the participant feels the associated feelings of both themselves and the parties involved, and they're observing it from a third person's perspective. So if you're having a life flash before your eyes, right, that's going to be played from your perspective. That's playing from your perspective versus a life review is being played from the perspective of you and the person who is involved. You're observing it from a third perspective, okay, third person perspective. And you're also doing that with a being of light and love next to you. Kind of, you're feeling the emotions you're feeling the emotions of not only yourself, but also the person that's involved in the experience. And so therefore you are feeling what they felt when you were working with them or talking to them or whatever moment or relationship you were having with them. So I think that's of significant difference from someone's life flashing before their eyes. Okay. These are considered the most influential components of NDEs, as they are what results in long-term change in someone's behavior and priorities. Yeah, so when people are talking about how the near-death experience changed them, they're referring back to the life review that they had and how that completely altered their perspective on how life works and how things work here in terms of what are the priorities in this life. Okay. All right. Page 110. Near-death experiences never describe feeling negatively judged by the spiritual being, no matter how unkind they were up to that point in their lives. In addition, they are observing from a third-person perspective. Again, I'm telling you how, like, I'm bringing that up because I think that shows a big difference between someone having their life flash before their eyes and what they're getting in this circumstance. Okay, they're seeing themselves, like I said, from a third person perspective, which is not commonly associated with someone's life flashing before their eyes. It's typically from your perspective, and not an outside one. In addition to the fact that no matter how unkind they were up to that point in their lives, this spiritual being is going through the experience with them. So that's definitely something I think is also noteworthy. Is there's another person involved in this life review. Another being, spiritual being. Of those who experienced life reviews, none of them reported inaccuracies in what they saw in the replay. I apologize about that. So none of them reported inaccuracies in what they saw in the replay, meaning that the life flash before their eyes was things that they had forgotten about, but when they were shown again, they were like, wow, that definitely happened to me. So obviously that's something of note, because it's not just a hallucination. It's an accurate replay of everything that happened in life. So that's proof number 5, and we're going to spend about 2 more slides on this, because I want to make sure that we give it enough air here, because this is one that gets a little more skepticism towards it. So on page 117, this is what I'm talking about. Dr. Susan Blackmore, a leading NDE skeptic, attributed the life review to a psychological defense mechanism at the time of a life-threatening event that involves a retreat into a timeless moment of pleasant or prior memories, right? It's a defense mechanism of, well, I don't want to be in my body right now because it's painful and I'm going through all these terrible things, so let me just retreat back into memories of the past that I had, which were pleasant. The explanation seems plausible until one beings encounter NDE memories that are not pleasant, right? Not pleasant. You notice in the life review, they're going through things that were not pleasant and pleasant for them and everyone else involved. Such content would not be expected if the life review were simply a pleasurable psychological escape from unpleasant circumstances. Okay? That seems to me a pretty sufficient answer to the skeptical attack on that, of saying, look, this person is trying to retreat into a memory because they're going through a terrible moment, right? They're going through a death experience. And so what they're trying to do is protect themselves by retreating back into a pleasurable memory. But the problem is, these people report not only going to pleasurable memories, but also going to unpleasant memories. And so therefore, it doesn't make sense that they would construct something of that nature. Okay? The NDEs would have unconscious occur so rapidly that a psychological defense mechanism would not have time to develop. This is something else I think of note, because of the fact that somebody is going to have, typically if you're in a car crash, for example, all of a sudden you hit a car crash and you're just like that, you're knocked unconscious immediately. The body doesn't really have a chance to respond to that. So it also doesn't really give you a chance to kind of build up the psychological awareness that you're trying to create an escape for yourself because of all the pain you're suffering. It just happens. You're just unconscious, and bam, you start going through the near-death experience. So again, I think that's of note. All right. Okay. So moving in here, continuing this, the last one, page 118, and this is something I think of interest, of course. A follow-up would be a study conducted of electrical stimulation of the temporal lobe by Dr. Wilder Penfield, as this is shown to be able to recreate elements of near-death experiences. Okay, so what they're saying right here is they're saying, look, guys, we've been able to recreate near-death experience elements via these temporal lobe experiments of using basically electrical waves to the brain to recreate these experiences that people describe having when they're dying. Now, however, this is also responded to by Dr. Emily Williams Kelly, Bruce Grayson, and Edward F. Kelly, okay, all of which have PhDs and are MDs, stated the following. Most of the experiences Penfield reported, in fact, bore little resemblance to actual NDEs. They consisted of hearing bits of music or singing, seeing isolated and repetitive scenes that seemed familiar and may, emphasis added, have been fragmentary memories, hearing voices, experiencing fear or other negative emotions, or seeing bizarre imagery that was often described as dreamlike. Okay, so not only is this being dreamlike what they're experiencing in these experiments. Okay, so the experiments, you have a dreamlike state where they're feeling fragments of what they're going through, versus in the NDE they're experiencing a complete experience, right? They're seeing all of this vision coming back to them, very, very clear to them what's happening as it's impacting them greatly. So it's the skeptic. I feel the theory there has little to no weight, as it's not, the explanatory power of that explanation is not nearly matching up to what the evidence is giving us. Okay. All right. Moving on here. Okay. Proof number 6, family reunions. Okay. Many near-death experiencers describe dramatic and joyous reunions with people known to them who die long before their near-death experience took place. Okay. Noting here, die long before their near-death experience took place. So grandma who died 30 years before perhaps you're having this NDE, you're going to meet her, right? And so that obviously is of note, because you would think if you were hallucinating or perhaps having some kind of vision, you would be meeting people who are a little more prevalent into your life. And perhaps grandma was prevalent in your life growing up, and so therefore that's the case. But that wouldn't explain the case for everyone, right? Meeting deceased relatives, you're not, as I'm sure many of you know, not everyone's super close with their deceased relatives. Or perhaps they died before that person ever had a chance to interact with that relative, right? Like perhaps that your grandma died when you were 2 or 3, so you never really had the chance to have a conversation with her or an interaction with her. So then again on page 123, a study conducted by Emily Williams Kelly, PhD of the Department of Psychiatric Medicine at the University of Virginia in 2001, summarizes this with 95% of the deceased individuals encountered were relatives, while only 5% were friends or acquaintances. Now, only 4% of the NDEers in the study met beings who were alive at the time of the NDE, right? This means that they're meeting people who were in their near-death experience who were alive at the time, right? So that doesn't necessarily add up, because if you're going into death, you should typically be only meeting people who are in death, okay? But they go on to provide an explanation here. Other studies have shown that in dreams or hallucinations, the beings encountered are much more likely to be people who are still living. Okay. So this would go to say, like, you're going to have some level of inaccuracy probably in any field of study that you go into. Okay. And so of this 100% that they survey, okay, 4% of the NDEers in the study met beings who were alive at the time of the NDE. Okay. And in addition to this, while only 5% were friends or acquaintances. So that 5% would fall into probably that 96% total for the study, and then the other 4% are meeting beings who are alive at the time of the NDE. Okay, so yeah, that's a really strong number to me of saying not only are they meeting relatives, they're only meeting deceased relatives. They're only meeting deceased friends. They're not meeting living people. The ones who are meeting living people are the minority, and typically those are associated with dreams or with hallucinations. Okay. All right. Now, what do the skeptics have to say on this? Skeptics would attempt to explain this as wishful visions, seeing deceased family members. However, this theory does not explain people who encountered deceased family members who they have never met, especially younger versions of them. Okay. Now, what I mean by that, is for example, children who have a near-death experience go and meet, say, their grandmother, okay? But they don't meet their grandmother as, 80, 90-year-old grandmother that they knew or possibly, like that would have been the age she was at when she died. They meet a young version of her. And the way that this becomes known is they come out of their near-death experience, and then when they start talking about the fact that, oh yeah, I met grandma, blah, 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 the parents will then show them a picture of grandma right around the age where she died. And they say, did you meet this person? And the child will be like, no, that wasn't them. They were a lot younger than that, right? And so they go get a young picture of the grandmother, and they show the kid a young picture of the grandmother, and they say, was this the person that you met? The answer is yes. So that's something that I think is difficult for that theory to try to explain away, because how are these people meeting family members who are deceased, who they've never met before? Especially in they're meeting them in a young state. Now, if they've seen them, if they knew them, had a prevalent relationship with them before they died, then they're seeing that person at the age, but it's not described as like an old and hard to get around. It's like you see them as an older person, but they seem sprightly and young. And so, yes, this is consistent with the family reunion proof. Okay. All right. Proof 7, from the mouth of babes. So the reason this is of relevance, okay, is obviously we're going to explain this right now. Page 23, it is through young children that we can help determine if NDEs are just made-up phenomenon. And it's through very young children that we can help prove once and for all that NDEs are natural events, not events, made up or influenced to match some television program. Okay, so essentially what they're saying here is that it's called the Oprah effect. Oprah, originally was one of the ones to really televise near-death experiences. And so she created this, people were really interested in them. Okay. And so what happens is people will watch near-death experiences, obviously because it's a fascinating topic. And then they have these preconceived notions of what a near-death experience would be like. And so when they die, they're just following this already outlined blueprint that's been given to them via an Oprah interview. So it's the Oprah effect that could potentially cause pollution, if you will, into the study, because people are expecting to go through these things. These are preconceived notions and of realities that they've built out, and so their brains just already constructed them, and they're just going through them. However, with a very young child, and we're talking 5 years or younger, these children have not grasped that concept yet of what that would mean. So here on page 137, 26 cases of near-death experiencers were 5 years or younger and were consistent with everything we see in the adult teenager NDEs. Okay, so this, and by consistent, we mean they go through the similar core elements of what you're looking to find in a near-death experiencer, such as an out-of-body experience, a lucid experience, right? A tunnel of light, a being of light and love, meeting deceased relatives, etc., etc. They have those elements there, okay? Skeptic analysis of this would say, again, the address of the children are lying. To address the children, they are lying for attention, is exactly what explains these NDEs. So it says, basically, the skeptic would come at it and say, look, these kids are lying because they know this is going to get them attention, and kids really want attention. However, the NDE is so profound of an experience that children are able to remember their account with astounding accuracy decades later. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't remember lies I told when I was 9 or 8 or 10 or 11. Now, you could make the argument that this lie they told was of great significance because of the fact that so many people were interested in what they had to say. I think that's a valid question to bring up. I think that's a valid skeptic. Now, the issue I hold with that is within the second part of saying the NDE is so profound that these people are able to retain accuracy in the way that they're describing it 20, 30 years later. I mean, I've read an account of a lady accurately 38 years later bringing up this experience. So if they lied about it, I feel like there would be a lot of inaccuracy that would come back through when they're interviewed later on the road. And there's actually a study that was conducted on this exact component of where are these people at. And I'll bring it up in one of the next books that I'm going to talk to you guys about. But it shows that there was a really high level of consistency in these children having the experience at a young age and then getting to their older age and having the exact same description of the experience. Okay. Proof number 8. So worldwide consistency. Now, this to me is the most impactful one. Why? Because that's what we should see. We should see if this is the truth, right? If near-death experiences are real, we should see consistency in all kinds of cultures, okay? And consistency in element, not interpretation. That's the key piece. Consistency in elements, not interpretation, okay? Now, page 149. The core NDE experience is the same all over the world, whether it's a near-death experience of a Hindu in India, a Muslim in Egypt, a Christian in the United States. The same core elements are present in all, including out-of-body experience, tunnel experience, feelings of peace, beings of light, a life review, reluctance to return because they love it. There's such a beautiful realm. And transformation after the NDE, meaning they come back completely transformed by this experience and they want to start changing their life around, but that takes time, and we'll cover that on proof 9. The study separated by if English was the first language of people or not, as well as non-Western nations versus Western nations. So that's how they deciphered basically Western Christian culture versus non-Western, non-Christian culture, non-English speaking culture. So that way they want to make sure that they're getting a strong line dividing these two cultures as to ensure that there wasn't some kind of cross-pollination of Christian influence as to what kind of experience they should be having. The elements appear to follow the same order of occurrence, right? So based off of the people telling exactly how these elements unfolded, that experience follows the exact same track, okay? And on page 169, Dr. Bruce Grayson makes a comment on how what I was saying earlier of elements being the same and experiences not necessary, or explanations not necessarily why. So even the cross-cultural differences observed suggest that it is not the core experience that differs, but the ways in which people interpret what they have experienced. So again, I'll go back to my example that I used on a previous video. If a bunch of people go to Paris and they see the Eiffel Tower, then you're going to have a lot of, especially if they're coming from different cultures, different ages, different backgrounds, they're all going to have kind of a different explanation of what they saw and the purpose of the Eiffel Tower. Okay, so, and to kind of give a little bit more here, if, like, for example, these people are all meeting a being of light and love. There's a common description for it. However, one might say it was Allah, right? Or one might say it was God, or one might say it was the highest ranking God in the Hindu system. You know, like one might say that it was, you know, this was all the beings of the universe in one, right? So this is kind of like a pluralistic view. Or a polytheistic view in a sense, I suppose. Either way, is what I'm trying to say is the experience is the same. How people interpret that experience is through the lens of which they have grown up in. Okay, so that would be what would explain those differences, and you would expect to see that, obviously, because if you took like people from all over the world to Disneyland, different things would be of note to them. Skeptics Analysis, generally reverting back to undermining the NDE itself. Generally it's going to sit within like, I haven't really seen a strong enough explanation for this. I'm sure I'm looking for them, so I'm sure I'm going to find one. But as of yet, I've not seen a strong enough skeptic objection to this proof that all these NDEs around the world are showing consistency. Okay, in what elements they're finding within the experience itself. All right, finally, proof number 9: changed lives. Okay, so has your life? So on page 177, they conduct a survey where they're speaking to these people of saying, "Hey, did your life change as a result of this near-death experience?" Well, of that, has your life changed specifically as a result of your experience? Of those responding, 73.1% answered yes, 12.7% answered uncertain, and only 14.2% answered no. Okay? That's a large amount of people going through the experience and saying, yes, this experience dramatically or drastically changed me. Okay? Page 177. Other studies have shown that it takes as long as 7 years or more for a person who has a NDE to fully integrate into their life the changes that resulted from the experience. So they might have changed, right, and just not known it, or maybe they didn't have enough time for it to really reflect and hit home for them. Now, what are these changes precisely? Okay, and this is something I want to kind of hit on. These changes, or this change, manifests as fearless of death. Now, they still fear the process of death. So people are still scared of like being shot or stabbed or cancer or whatever form of death is coming. They're still fearful of that. However, they don't fear death itself, of being dead. They no longer fear that. They now look forward to it in a sense. Having a higher view of relationships and knowledge, and typically want to join a field of service, healing, or social support. So they come back with a much lower view of awards and wealth and fame, and they have a much higher view of relationships in their life, along with knowledge that they're gaining in their life. Okay, so those changes are consistent with what you would see a religion teaching, for example, or specifically anyway, Christianity, teaching that those are the primary elements that we need to focus on in this life. Okay, so that's proof number 9. All right, so that's the 9 proofs. So we'll roll through them real quick again to remind you guys. All right, so proof number 1, lucid death. Okay, proof number 2, out-of-body experience, commonly referred to as OBE. Okay, proof number 3, the blind see. Proof number 4, impossibly conscious. This is including under monitored conditions of general anesthesia. Proof number 5, perfect playback. So the life review, right? That in and of itself is such a massive experience for someone. That's the most, considered by many, the most impactful part of the near-death experience. Proof number 6, family reunion. Precisely meeting deceased relatives, including those whom you've never met. Proof 7, from the mouth of babes, young children, ages 5 and under and 5 and up. These children are having near-death experiences that are described in with exactly the same elements that we would find in an adult near-death experience. Okay, proof that's pretty strong, Okay, proof 8, worldwide consistency. Again, this is my personal favorite. If an afterlife is real and it's consistent with one type of view, then what we would find is that this experience would be very similar amongst all human beings. Okay, it wouldn't be like, one person would have this crazy karma experience and this and that. We find consistency no matter the worldview of a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian. They're still experiencing very similar elements. Now, the way they interpret that is through their religious lens, because that's typically the lens in which they view the afterlife. So they're going to use their religious lens to interpret those elements to say, oh, well, this was such and such, or this was that, right? Because that's how they understand that information coming to them. Finally, proof number 9, changed lives, right? So not only was this experience a lucid experience, it's actually such an impactful experience that it literally changes the trajectory of this person's entire life, right? And then they come back with a redefined sense of what they should care about, what their life should be about, okay? So those are the 9 proofs, okay? The 9 proofs that you can have to know that a near-death experience is a reliable way of proving the afterlife is real, okay? So that gets us to basically theism, basically theism. Now, does that prove Christianity is true? Not necessarily, but we will cover that, right? We will cover that. Right now, this is kind of like, I could see this being a strong argument between atheism and theism, of there is an afterlife, there isn't one, okay? Or materialism specifically. All right. So if you guys enjoyed the video, okay, thank you so much for taking the time to get to this point. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a favor, okay? Step 1, subscribe to the channel. Step 2, give this video a like, right? That would be a big help for me. Step 3, comment, all right? And if you're feeling really gracious, step 4 would be to share it, okay? If you could share this video with someone you think it'd be impactful with, I would really appreciate that. I'm continuing to work to grow this channel, this ministry. I really love doing this, and I hope to one day make this my living. But that's going to take time, and so the best way you guys can help me out right now is to subscribe, give the video a like, comment, and I'll keep pumping out the videos for you guys. So in the meantime, I want to thank you guys for staying this far along. If you have, I'm working to create more videos, increasing the content, making cooler stuff, more relevant things. So like I said, if you have a suggestion or you have something you want me to cover, hit the comments below this video and let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right. See you then.